Time now for the front page. This is news while we were sleeping, and since the last show, the Wells Report. Let's get busy. Israel-Hamas still leading the news. Here are some updates. From Fox News, President Biden's administration has urged Israel to delay its ground invasion of the Gaza Strip following Hamas's unprecedented October 7th assault. Administration officials say they recommended the delay in hopes to buy time for further hostage negotiations. This in a report from the New York Times. The officials reportedly said no ultimatums were made. However, the U.S. would still fully support Israel if there were to move forward with a ground invasion. But the U.S. is poised to get involved in the Israel-Hamas war should the conflict escalate into a regional war, intentionally targeting American personnel, according to senior officials. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said yesterday the U.S. expects Iranian proxies to seek opportunities to escalate the Israeli-Hamas war and asserted the Biden administration is prepared to respond accordingly if American civilians or armed forces become targets. Quote, "This is not what we want, not what we're looking for. We don't want escalation," according to the Secretary of State. "We don't want to see our forces or our personnel come under fire. But if that happens, we are ready," unquote. Secretary Austin, the defense secretary, also said, quote, "What we're seeing is a prospect of a significant escalation of attacks on our troops and our people throughout the region. We're going to do what's necessary to make sure our troops are in the position and that they were protected and have the ability to respond." He affirmed that the U.S. has the right to defend itself and said, "We will not hesitate to take appropriate action." Secretary Austin also said the U.S. would continue to increase its presence in the region to send another message to those who would seek to widen this conflict. In fact, United States Marines are moving toward the conflict. This from CNN. A U.S. Marine Rapid Response Force is headed to the waters off the coast of Israel, and the Pentagon is preparing American troops for a potential deployment into the country, escalating the U.S.'s show of force in the region as it works to prevent the conflict between Israel and Hamas from widening any further. Two defense officials familiar with the planning said the Rapid Response Force, consisting of 2,000 Marines and sailors, is being sent. It will join a growing number of U.S. warships and forces converging on Israel as the U.S. seeks to send a message of deterrence to Iran and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. Sunday evening, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin ordered that roughly 2,000 troops prepare for a potential deployment to Israel to help with tasks like medical and logistical support, according to multiple defense officials. Taken together, the moves are aimed at forestalling a wider regional war, said officials, but they also risk deepening the U.S. involvement in a conflict in which the Biden administration is trying to avoid direct military action. Internationally, China has deployed 6 warships to the Middle East. This from the U.S. Express. China has deployed 6 warships to the Middle East as the conflict between Israel and Hamas escalates, according to reports. The 44th Naval Escort Task Force from the People's Liberation Army Navy in the Eastern Theater there has been involved in routine operations in the region and spent several days in Oman last week. The Chinese warships left Muscat for an unspecified location over the weekend after participating in an exercise with the Omani Navy. The task force includes the Zibo, a guided missile destroyer, the frigate Jingzhou, and the supply ship Qiandahu, all of which will be stationed in the Middle East as Israel prepares for a ground invasion of Gaza. In news of the states, the United States, in fact, New Hampshire, voters are split on increasing aid for Israel. This from Fox News. Voters in Manchester, New Hampshire, are split in support of the U.S. sending humanitarian aid overseas to Israel. A recent Fox News survey found voters strongly side with Israel in the recent attacks, but some residents in New Hampshire say the U.S. should stay out of the conflict and not send money overseas. Patrick, who is a bar and restaurant owner in Manchester, told Fox News the U.S. government should focus on spending money on issues at home. Another resident, Mary, agreed the U.S. should wait before sending money to Israel. Quote, "I think we have to just wait it out a little bit," she said. "Instead of sending money to every country, we have problems right here on our border. I think we should really rectify that first," unquote. "We have a lot of issues here that need to be addressed on our own ground as opposed to just sending money to other foreign countries," said another individual. Other residents who do support sending aid overseas with no constraints, one said the U.S. has an obligation to the world and or as a world power to help other countries. Out of Texas, A moving corporation and consulting firm says that it is a new world and Texas is the center of it. The Lone Star State is expected to become the most populous state in the U.S. by 2100, with a whopping 96 million residents, this according to a new study. In 77 years, New York, Chicago, and L.A. will be replaced by Texas cities as the largest in the nation. A study from MoveBuddha.com claims. Based on current migration trends, MoveBuddha predicts that by 2100, major Texas cities will replace New York City, L.A., and Chicago as the country's most populous cities. The Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, currently the fourth largest in the nation, is expected to swell to a population of nearly 34 million by the turn of the 22nd century, replacing New York City as the biggest city in America. Houston will rise from 7.2 million to 31.3 million people. Austin will see its population grow tenfold from the current 2.3 million to almost 23 million, according to the forecasts. And then there's Georgia. Susan Hodgson, things couldn't get much worse. Her house was demolished accidentally. Last month, Hodgson came back from her to find her longtime Atlanta family property a pile of rubble, this according to the Associated Press. I'm furious, said Hodgson. I keep waking up thinking, is this a joke or something? I'm in shock. Hodgson received a call from a neighbor while she was away asking whether she had hired somebody to demolish her home. Hodgson told the neighbor she hadn't hired anybody to tear down the home. The neighbor went over to confront the worker, who replied harshly, "Shut up and mind your own business," unquote. Hodgson then sent a family member over to speak with the worker, who realized, well, he was at the wrong address. The family member said, "I want to see a permit or something." The guy pulled it out and says, "Oh, I'm at the wrong address." He then packed up everything and left. But the house is still gone. Hodgson told Fox 5, Georgia, that You Call It, We Haul It, the name of the company responsible, has not made contact with her. USA Today was unable to reach the company. In a statement to Fox 5, the company said it was investigating. Business. It looks like Chevron has agreed to acquire Hess for $53 billion. Here's the news from Fox Business. Chevron Corporation announced today that it had reached an agreement to acquire competitor Hess Corporation in an all-stock deal valued at $53 billion. The energy company said the acquisition upgrades and diversifies Chevron's already advantaged portfolio. Hess's Bakken assets add another leading U.S. shale position to Chevron's DJ and Permian Basin operations and further strengthen Permian Basin operations and further strengthen domestic energy security, said Chevron in a statement. The combined company is expected to grow production and free cash flow faster and for longer than Chevron's current 5-year guidance. Chevron says the deal, which is expected to close in the first half of next year, has been unanimously approved by both companies' board of directors, and it is to acquire all of the outstanding shares of Hess in an all-stock transaction valued at $53 billion or $171 per share, based on Chevron's closing price, October 20th, 2023. News from the Supreme Court of the United States. This from USA Today. The world was more than a year into the pandemic when the Food and Drug Administration became alarmed about reports of Americans treating COVID-19 with an anti-parasitic drug often used for horses and cows. Eager to head off an untested and potentially dangerous fad treatment, they called it, the agency posted a warning on its website noting that the drug ivermectin was not approved for COVID-19 and that ingesting doses of the drug frequently given to farm animals had already left multiple people in the hospital. Quote, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow." This according to the FDA posting on social media in mid-2021, as COVID-19 vaccines were already widely available in the U.S. The quote was, and this is the exact quote, "Seriously, y'all, stop it," unquote. Those warnings are now the subject of a pending lawsuit by 3 doctors who claim the FDA overstepped its authority by weighing in with medical advice they say should have been left to physicians. The ivermectin suit is one of several working through federal courts challenging the FDA's power to make decisions or dispense information. Some of the suits, including a challenge to FDA approval of the abortion drug mifepristone, involve a sheen of politics, with conservative groups lining up to challenge the federal government's power. At an earlier stage of the abortion bill case, the FDA drew the support of 253 members of Congress, all of them Democrats. The doctors challenging the drug, ivermectin, secured support from 147 lawmakers, all Republicans. Public health advocates worry the litigation could undercut the FDA's authority broadly. The agency faced setbacks with several of the challenges, including one involving ivermectin at the New Orleans-based Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, some of the most conservative appeals courts in the nation. The Fifth Circuit also blocked access to mifepristone earlier this year, a decision that was later put on hold by the Supreme Court of the United States. Speaking of which, is third time the charm for the speaker's race. This, according to The Hill. House Republicans will embark on their third attempt to pick a speaker this week, heading back to square one as they huddle to pick a nominee for the top spot and hope that their new candidate can muster enough support to win the gavel on the floor. The conference reset comes after a majority of members voted to drop House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan as their nominee after he failed to win the speakership on 3 ballots and bled support on each conservative vote, or consecutive vote. Before that, Majority Leader Steve Scalise withdrew his name from the race as Jordan backers said they would not support him on the floor. Now, 9 Republicans are vying for the top spot, but it remains unclear if any of the candidates will be able to drum up votes to secure the gavel on the House floor. We will see. We'll be watching that situation, and we'll report on it immediately here on the Wells Report. And that is today's front page.